Man and woman, an unnecessary conflict. Sri Aurobindo. Usually, a soul follows continuously the same line of sex. If there are shiftings of sex, it is, as a rule, a matter of parts of the personality which are not central. Not sex exactly, but what might be called the masculine and feminine principle is there in the psychic being. It is a difficult question whether sex is altered in rebirth. There are certain lines the reincarnation follows, and so far as my experience goes, and general experience goes, one follows usually a single line. But the alteration of sex cannot be declared impossible. There may be some who do alternate. The presence of feminine traits in a male does not necessarily indicate a past feminine birth. They may come in the general play of forces and their formations. There are besides qualities common to both sexes. Also, a fragment of the psychological personality may have been associated with a birth not one's own. One can say of a certain person of the past, that was not myself, but a fragment of my psychological personality was present in him. Rebirth is a complex affair and not so simple in its mechanism as in the popular idea. The Mother. You have asked me what I think of the feminist movement, and what will be the consequences of the present war for it. One of the first effects of the war has certainly been to give quite a new aspect to the question. The futility of the perpetual oppositions between men and women was at once made clearly apparent, and behind the conflict of the sexes, only relating to exterior facts, the gravity of the circumstances allowed the discovery of the always existent, if not always outwardly manifested fact of the real collaboration, of the true union of these two complementary halves of humanity. Many men were surprised to see how easily women could replace them in most of the posts they occupied before, and to their surprise was added something of regret not to have found sooner a real partner of their work and their struggles in her, whom more often they had only considered as an object of pleasure and distraction, or, at best, as the guardian of their hearth and mother of their children. Certainly woman is that, and to be it well requires exceptional qualities, but she is not only that, as the present circumstances have amply proved. In going to tend the wounded in the most difficult material conditions, actually under the enemy's fire, the so-called weak sex has proved that its physical energy and power of endurance were equal to those of man. But where, above all, women have given proof of exceptional gifts is in their organizing faculties. These faculties of administration were recognized in them long ago by the Brahmanic India of before the Mohammedan conquest. There is a popular adage there which says, "Property governed by women means prosperous property." But in the Occident, Semitic thought allied to Roman legislation has influenced customs too deeply for women to have the opportunity of showing their capacity for organization. It is true that in France one frequently sees the woman absolute mistress of the administration of her house, even from the pecuniary point of view, and the so proverbial riches of the French petite bourgeoisie proves that the system has a good side. It was rare, however, to see the feminine faculties utilized to direct undertakings of great importance, and until now, the confidential post of public administration had always been closed to them. The present war has shown that in refusing the cooperation of women, the governments deprived themselves of precious help. I will cite you an event as an example. A few months after the outbreak of the war, when the Germans had almost entirely occupied the Belgian territory, the inhabitants of the invaded regions were in indescribable misery. Fortunately, thanks to the initiative of several rich American men and women, a society was founded to supply the most urgent needs of the sorely tried populations. As the result of certain military operations, a fairly large group of small villages were suddenly deprived of all food. Famine was imminent. The American Society sent a message to some similar English societies asking that 5 vans of the most indispensable supplies should be dispatched immediately. These vans must reach their destination in 3 days. The men to whom this request was addressed replied that it was quite impossible to comply with it. Luckily, a woman heard of the matter. It seemed terrible to her that in such tragic circumstances one could use the word impossible. She belonged to a group of women who aided the wounded and sufferers of the war. Immediately, they promised the American Society they would satisfy it, and in 3 days the numerous obstacles were overcome, though some of the difficulties, especially those concerning transport, seemed truly insurmountable. A powerful organizing mind, an ardent will, had done the miracle. The provisions arrived in time, and the dreadful misery of famine was thus avoided. This is not to say that only woman's exceptional qualities have been revealed by the present war. Her weaknesses, her faults, her pettiness have also been given the opportunity of display. And certainly, if women wish to take the place they claim in the governing of nations, they must progress much further in the mastery of self, the broadening of ideas and points of view, in intellectual suppleness and oblivion of their sentimental preferences in order to become worthy of the management of public affairs. It is certain that purely masculine politics have given proof of incapacity. They have foundered too often in their search of strictly personal interest and in their arbitrary and violent action. Doubtless, women's politics would bring about a tendency to disinterestedness and more humanitarian solutions. But unfortunately, in their present state, women in general are creatures of passion and enthusiastic partisanship. They lack the reasoning calm that purely intellectual activity gives. The latter is undoubtedly dangerous because hard and cold and pitiless. Nevertheless, it is unquestionably useful to master the overflow of sentiment which cannot hold a predominant place in the ruling of collective interests. These faults, which would be serious if the activity of women had to replace that of men, could form, on the contrary, by a collaboration of the two sexes, an element of compensation for the opposite faults of men. That would be the best means of leading them gradually to mutual perfecting. To reduce the woman's part to solely interior and domestic occupations, and the man's part to exclusively exterior and social occupations, thus separating what should be united, would be to perpetuate the present sad state of things, from which both are equally suffering. It is in front of the highest duties and heaviest responsibilities that their respective qualities must unite in a close and confident solidarity. Is it not time that this hostile attitude of the two sexes facing one another as irreconcilable adversaries should cease? A severe, a painful lesson is being given to the nations. On the ruins piled up now, new constructions more beautiful and more harmonious can be erected. It is no longer the moment for frail competitions of self-interested claims. All human beings, men or women, must associate in a common effort to become conscious of the highest ideal which asks to be realized, and to work ardently for its realization. The question to be solved, the real question, is then not only that of a better utilization of their outer activities, but above all that of an inner spiritual growth. Without inner progress, there is no possible outer progress. Thus, the problem of feminism, as all the problems of the world, comes back to a spiritual problem. For the spiritual reality is at the basis of all others. The divine world, the Dhammata of Buddhism, is the eternal foundation on which are built all the other worlds. In regard to this supreme reality, all are equal, men and women, in rights and in duties. The only distinction which can exist in this domain being based on the sincerity and ardor of aspiration, on the constancy of will. And it is in the recognition of this fundamental spiritual equality that can be found the only serious and lasting solution for this problem of the relation of the sexes. It is in this light that it must be placed. It is at this height that must be sought the focus of action and new life, around which will be constructed the future temple of humanity. But women are in principle the executive power. You must never forget that. And in order to receive the inspiration, you can take support from a masculine consciousness if you feel the need for it. There is the supreme consciousness, which is more certain, but still, if you need an intermediary. But for the execution, it is you who have the power to carry it out in all the details, with all the power of organization. I am instilling this into our women members of Parliament. You know, there are women in Parliament, and I am teaching them that. Do not be submissive to men. It is you who have the power of execution. This will have its effect. Women are not more bound to the vital and material consciousness than men are. On the contrary, as they have not, in general, the arrogant mental pretensions of men, it is easier for them to discover their psychic being and to allow it to guide them. In general, they are not conscious in a mental way which can be expressed in words, but they are conscious in their feelings, and the best of them are so even in their actions. What I object to is the male element and female element. Well, I find that it is not true, and I shall always say it is not true. There is an element like this and another like that. There is an activity like this and an activity like that. But why the devil do you want to be masculine and the other feminine? It is not like that. This masculine-feminine business is a trick of nature. It has arranged things here like that. So you see, I am going to tell you, when one descends from above, well, right up there, one has no idea of masculine and feminine and all that nonsense. As you come down and arrive here, it begins to become something real. So you tell yourself, well, that's how nature has arranged things. Good. But what I say is that these conceptions, these very conceptions which make one element masculine and the other feminine, this is a conception which has come from below, that is, has come out of man's brain, which cannot think otherwise than of man and woman, because he is still an animal. There you are. And that's how I feel. I have always felt this. I have said it from the beginning and will repeat it till the very end. And if you don't want to hear me say so, don't speak to me about it. Mother, since the beginning of creation, why is there this difference between male and female? Since the beginning of which creation? Which creation are you speaking about? Of the earth? Yes. First, this is not correct. There are species in which there is no difference, and in the beginning there wasn't any. First point. Second point. The terrestrial creation is a purely material creation, and is a sort of materialization and condensation of the universal creation. But in the universal creation, this difference does not necessarily exist. All the possibilities are there, and all things possible have existed and still exist, and this differentiation is not at all the basis of creation. So your question does not stand, for it is incorrect. But why in the material creation? I am telling you it has not been like that from the beginning. A zoologist could tell you that there are species which are not like that at all. Nature has tried this method. It tries many things. It has made all possible species, made the two in one, made every possible thing. It tries like this because probably it appears more practical to it. I don't know. That's all. But on the other planes, even in the terrestrial world, the more subtle planes of the terrestrial world, even in the subtle physical and the vital and mental, there are beings divided in two like this, but also beings which are neither male nor female. They exist. For instance, in the vital world, it is extremely rare to come across differentiations of sex. The beings are usually sexless, and I strongly suspect that the world of the gods, as described to us by men, has been largely influenced by human thought. In any case, there are many deities who are without sex. In all the stories told of the pantheons of all countries, there is a good deal that has been strongly influenced by human thought. So this difference is simply a means used by nature to achieve its aim. That's all. Nothing more than that. We must take it like that. It is not an eternal symbol, not at all. Now there are many people who are very keen on this distinction. They may keep it if they like, but it is not at all something final or eternal or perfect in itself. It was perhaps the ideal of the overmind creation. That is possible. And yet, even then, not totally, only partially. But still, those who are so fond of this differentiation, let them keep it if they like, if it gives them pleasure. It has its advantages and disadvantages, many disadvantages. From the point of view of the idea of sex, that there are two different sexes, that still exists. The idea. But that's the fault of the person who thinks. One can very well dispense with thinking. You know, these very petty limits of thought are things which ought to disappear before you can even attempt to transform your body. If you still have these very petty ideas, which are purely animal, there is not much hope that you could begin the least process for the transformation of your body. You must first transform your thought, for that is something which is still crawling far down below. If you are not able to feel that a conscious and living being can be quite free, even in a certain definite form, from all feeling of sex, it means that you are still up to your neck in the original animality. In the inner thought one feels it, but in the actuality of material life. What about the actuality? In the outer life, I have not yet realized that. In the inner, you spend your time thinking about it? But one may live 24 hours out of 24 without giving a single thought to this difference. You must really be hypnotized by this affair. Do you suppose that when I speak to you, I think that you are a man, and when I speak to Tara, I think she is a woman? Still, there is a difference. Ah, but it is not at all necessary. In theory, I understand. In theory? What theory? That there is no difference. But when I am in contact with someone, either I am speaking to a man or a woman. Well, it's a great pity both for you and for the other person. No, it is just the very opposite of what ought to happen. When you are in contact with someone and speaking with him, it is precisely to what surpasses all animality that you should speak. It is to the soul you must speak, never to the body. Even more is asked of you, for you are asked to address the divine, not even the soul, the one divine in every being, and to be conscious of that. What should be the ideal of a modern woman in ordinary life? In ordinary life, women can have all the ideas they like. It is not very important. From the spiritual point of view, men and women are equal in their capacity to realize the divine. Each one must do so in his or her own way and according to his or her own possibilities.